Alright, make sure to be taking notes on all of this. In front of you, you should have a note card from the sub. You should have your success criteria sheet, which is right being displayed, with the highlighter, and a sheet of paper to be taking notes. We're going to outline our new learning target. Well, actually, we're still working with factoring, so this should already be highlighted from previous. Now what we're going to do is the success criteria of difference of squares. And all the success criteria you need to do that, which is factoring frames, perfect squares, the correct signs, and factor x squared. So this should all be highlighted on your success criteria. Now, in front of you is your note card. On one side, you are going to write perfect squares. Alright, and what I write down is what you should be writing on your card. So x to the 1 times x to the 1. Remember, we add our exponents, so x squared. x2 times x2. We add, which is x4. x3 times x3. We add, which is x6. x4. x4. We add, which is 8. Okay, so this is on one side of your note card. Once you're done writing that down, flip it over, and you're going to write these other perfect squares. You're going to write 1 times 1 equals 1. 2 times 2 equals 4. 3 times 3 equals 9. 4 times 4 equals 16. 5 times 5 equals 25. 6 times 6 equals 36. 7 times 7 equals 49. 8 times 8 equals 64. 9 times 9 equals 81. 10 times 10 equals 100. 11 times 11 equals 121. So on one side, again, you're writing your x's. Those are your perfect squares for your x's or your variables. On the opposite side, you are writing your perfect squares for numbers. So perfect squares are two things that are multiplied that are the same thing to give me an answer. So example, 5 times 5 will give me 25. Now, here we're going to do a few examples. So you're going to write this on your sheet of paper that you have. The first example is 4x squared minus 9. My first step is to go ahead and make my factoring frames. I would now like to work from left to right. So I start with my 4. My perfect square of 4 is 2 times 2. On the other side of the card, we know my perfect square of x squared is x times x. My perfect square of 9 is 3 times 3. Now here comes the signs. We know that we want to get a negative. In order to do that, that's a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. So all you really need to do is just make one of these a positive and one of them a negative. And that is your final answer. Let's go ahead and do another one. 25 x4 minus 81 y squared. Again, I start with my factoring frames. I start from left to right. The perfect square of 25 is 5 times 5. X to the 4th is x squared times x squared. 81 is 9 times 9. Y squared, even though on your note card it has x's, remember those are any variables would work. So that'd be y1 times y1. Remember, on these, all you do is make one positive, one negative. There's your final answer. Let's go ahead and do one more. 100z squared minus 1. So I make my factoring frames. Start from left to right. The perfect square of 100 is 10 times 10. Z squared is z1 times z1. The perfect square of 1 is 1 times 1. I make 1 a positive, 1 a negative. And that's my answer. What I want you to do now is evaluate with your cups. Are you feeling pretty confident on this? So green. Kind of confident, but you just need some more practice. Yellow. Or red, you have no idea what you just learned. Make sure to look around and ask questions too, because I'm sure that someone would be willing to help if you're still confused. Now the sub will go ahead and give you a practice sheet. On this practice sheet, the top are going to be practice problems of difference of squares. The bottom is going to be difference of squares along with sum and product. So if you weren't here for sum and product, make sure that you catch up with someone who was to receive their notes. The other thing that I want to bring up is looking at the difference of squares in sum and product real quick. So remember, a difference of squares problem will only have two terms. 1, 2, and is separated by a subtraction sign. Where my sum and product problems remember, my leading coefficient is x squared with a 1. There's 3 terms, and my signs can be whatever. It could be a plus, a minus, anything like that. For those of you that weren't here, I will go ahead and do this sum and product problem, and if you have questions, you need to ask someone that was here. So my first step is to find the factors of my third term. So my factors of 5 are 1 times 5. I want that to equal a positive 5. So my options of multiplying to be a positive are a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. Now I make my factoring frames. In order to get x squared, that's x1 times x1, now I need to ask myself, what factors will add or subtract to give me 6? Well, in this case, I only have one set of factors. That's not always going to work out. But in this case it does, so it's 1 and 5. Now I need to keep in mind my symbols. So I need to ask myself, if this plus times plus and minus times minus equals a positive 5, what will add or subtract to be a positive 6? So I'm just going to go ahead and try out some. I'm first going to do a negative and a negative. I know negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5, what we want. Well, when I do negative 1 minus 5, I get a negative 6. We don't want that. So I know that's not my answer. Now let's go ahead and try two positives. I know that 1 times 5 is positive 5, and that's what we want. 1 plus 5 is a positive 6, and that's what we want. So this is my final answer. Okay, make sure to check out the practice from the sub and ask peers your questions if you have any.